This is a short bite episode of Homeschool Together. Hello and welcome to Homeschool Together Short Bite Edition. Today we're going to be doing a curriculum review for our short bite episode, and specifically the Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons by Siegfried Engelmann. This is a reading curriculum, a phonetics-based reading curriculum that obviously says, 100 lessons. So if you could imagine 100 days to learn to read, this curriculum does that. So this is a book-based curriculum. So it's a simple one book curriculum. About roughly, I have it in my hands here, roughly 400 pages.
Mm-hmm.
That's not dense pages; those are very loose pages. So you can imagine, every lesson takes about four pages to do. The price of this, retail I think is $24, but you just said that you can get it cheaper as well.
Get it for $14 on Amazon. Absolutely. Or $10 used, so very affordable option.
Yeah, so this can be a starter curriculum. So it starts very much from the ground floor, no letter recognition. You can just go straight into the sounds. The one thing that I did like about this book is there's about 15-20 pages for the educator at the beginning of it that goes through in depth the expectations, how to do the program, and it's very, very, very specific on how they want you to go through it. They have some glossary of sounds, so you can get the very clear, accurate sound that they want you to achieve for each letter. I did enjoy that. It's a little dense, so you may have to spend a few sittings to read it. It wasn't something you just breeze through. So it's definitely something you want to prepare for before you actually start your first lesson. And I would actually encourage people, if you're going to get this book, obviously it's pretty cheap, $14. It's absolutely worth something to get just to see if it's something you're interested in, even whether or not you use it. I do think you should probably go through a lesson or two script before you actually sit down with your learner, because this book is heavily scripted. It is actually literally just telling you exactly what to say to your learner, and exactly what you expect from the learner. And it even has very specific text on how to correct your learner, on, that is not how you say that, this is how you say it. And so there's actually scripting involved within that. So there's almost no creativity with respect to the educator. They do want you to follow this very tightly. Now, I tried this program when my daughter was 4, and I crashed and burned. Definitely not something to start that early. I think
it depends on your learner.
It absolutely does. Absolutely.
But there's no visual with this.
No.
It's all text. It's all parent reading this text and getting call and response from their learner. There's no pictures or any other visual clues that would be exciting to a visual type learner.
Yeah, and so basically each lesson is about 4 pages, and it's broken up into tasks, and each task can be multiple pieces. So you can imagine in one lesson that might take about 10, maybe 15 minutes. My learner is doing it in about 5 to 7 minutes, but we'll talk a little bit about why that is a little bit later. But you can imagine there's about 6 or 7 tasks. Each task has multiple little pieces. Takes about 10 to 15 minutes to complete the lesson. So not too bad. They do have nice formatting. So when you are reading what you're supposed to be reading, they have it in this reddish pink text. They have the call and response in a bolded pink text. So exactly how you're supposed to say to your learner, they emphasize that with quotes. And then there is a text that you're meant to hear back from your learner in quotes. So it's very, very prescriptive. It's literally no deviation. You just go ahead and read it, you run through it, and you do it.
So does this have any kind of reading with, stories to read or anything? No. Or is this just purely, here's the phonetics, here's how to, this is total phonics?
It is total phonics. There is no side stories. Now, I think around lesson 10, I think maybe 15, when you start to get to there, they start doing these little micro stories, one sentence with a picture, and there's some, reading comprehension questions.
Okay.
And then as you progress through the 100 lessons, stories begin to come in. And I think somewhere around lesson, let's say, I'm looking at it right now, somewhere around lesson 50 or so, you start to read whole paragraphs of text. No images, no short stories. These are not Bob books. You're reading full on 60, 70 words. And your learner is going to be reading at that level at halfway through the book. So it's not even that 100 lessons that you'll start reading. It's well before that. It is a very aggressive program. And we'll get into like who this is for and maybe who this isn't a little bit later. But the lessons and the tasks are very repetitive. You will be doing the exact same thing over and over for the, lessons will kind of blend together in the sense that they'll do the same tasks over and over, and they'll maybe introduce a new word or a new word pairing, a letter pairing, a new letter that you have to learn, some phonetic letter combination. In the text, they use a lot of the arrow method, where there's a bullet, a little bullet dot, where you put your finger on it and you're sliding to the next dot, and then that corresponds with a sound. And then you move to the next dot, which corresponds to another sound, and then the arrow ends. They incorporate this throughout the book, start to finish, and I even think in the large paragraph reading towards the end, they lose the dots towards the end, but halfway through they're still having all the individual dots on every single letter. So your learner is really getting the idea that every single sound, every single letter has a sound, and then I have to make sure I say each and every one of those sounds, and eventually they purge that for reading speed.
So how often are you supposed to do lessons? Is this intended to be done?
I think it depends on your learner, but if you can do about 15 minutes a day, it's not a big deal. You can do a lesson every single day on the work week, like Monday through Friday, and you can get 5 lessons a week. You can imagine that would be about 20 weeks of learning, so 5 or 6 months you might complete the program.
And when you complete it, at what reading level should they be at? What kind of is it? They're reading full long paragraphs?
They're reading, in essence, full paragraph books length pages.
So they could read an easy level chapter book.
Easy level chapter book at the end of this is the expectation. Yes.
Wow. So that's pretty impressive to all be captured in one book, because I know even completing All About Reading level 1, which we're just about to complete, it would not go that far.
No, absolutely not. And
so this may go well into like a first grade reading level.
Yeah. And so let me go into a little bit about how I'm using this. It may differ a little bit on a normal person. Maybe we'll talk about both scenarios, and
I think that's a good
reader idea. And then what we're doing with it. So I'll talk about how we're doing it. I'm about at the end of All About Reading level 1. So we are full sentence, full stories, 7-8 pages long, multiple lines per page level of reading cadence. She's reading more than CVC words. She's got sight words included in there as well. So we're pretty much to the end of that level 1 curriculum. She's doing pretty good, and I was pretty happy with that. What I wanted to do was, I felt that her mastery of some things was a little lacking. And what I've begun to do is use other curriculums as ways to backfill.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've used this analogy before in some of our other podcasts, like a basketball player. A high-level basketball player still practices their free throws. They still practice their jump shot. They still practice, dribbling. And I found that analogy is what I'm trying to do now. So I'm using the 100 lessons as a way to backfill on the mastery of those simple tasks while I'm also doing the All About Reading curriculum. The other thing, too, is that when you start off early, after having gone through the All About Reading level 1, I'm coming back, in essence, doing this right from the beginning again.
Mm-hmm.
And what that's doing is it's giving her a lot of confidence.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm able to do these lessons as sort of warm-ups for my All About Reading lesson, or reward at the end of the All About Reading lesson that said, hey, let's do our quick 100 lesson. This has been extremely helpful with her reading speed, with her confidence, and that is mainly how I'm using it. So I'm just using it as a backfill. I believe I'm going to hit a wall somewhere around lesson 50, because I will actually push past where we are in the All About Reading.
That'll be a very interesting point to see if she's at the level now to use this program to go further than you've gone, further than something she's already been introduced to.
Yeah, and I wonder if it's just gonna catch on like wildfire. I'm about 20 or 30 lessons in right now, and it's been very effective. I've been doing it for about a month as kind of this review method. That's how I'm using it. Now for a normal reader, if this is your first introduction to reading, you may want to slow it down just a tad, since I'm doing it every day. Like the other day we did 2 of them because she wanted a day off. I said, fine, give me 2 of these lessons and I'll give you a day off. She hasn't.
Yeah, she totally negotiated a day off the other day.
She totally negotiated a day off.
She was like, I agreed to do double of all my work if I can have Friday off. And I was like, you're so clever. This is great.
Yeah, the hostage negotiation. So it's been, I think for a new reader, this may be very intense. So I would almost recommend somebody to do something like the 4 weeks to learn, 4 weeks to read.
Right. The
program.
Learning Dynamics that we talked about.
The Learning Dynamics one that was reviewed, I think, by Dawn, one of our listeners. I would do a program like that first.
Or All About Reading.
Or get into All About Reading a little bit before you jump into something like this. I believe this curriculum is very intense from an educator standpoint and a learner standpoint. I think it can be a little overbearing if your learner is not. Maybe we're getting a little bit into who is this for and who is this not for. If your learner is willing to sit with you and do activities and do workbooks and do call and response and stay focused for 10 minutes or so on one subject, I think this is something you can do.
This might be a great book for someone who's let their kid kind of take their kindergarten year and not really worried too much about reading, just read to them a bunch, and now you're starting a formal phonics program with a slightly older child. This is probably a great curriculum because they have a little bit more attention span.
And this program is famous for English as a second language, and also people who never learned to read in schools. So maybe like they had dyslexia, or they just never learned to read. They do this program for those type of people as well. So it actually has applications for older children and adults, as well as first-time readers. And that's why I think it's very effective, and I think it's where it gets a lot of its accolades.
This could be really good, too, for a family who maybe had a child in public school for maybe kinder, first grade, and they get them home, and they're struggling with reading, and you want to just make sure that they have a really good basics in phonics without having to do a year-long phonics program.
Exactly.
You can do this, and then you can go quickly through the sections that they know really well, and then slow down at the sections they don't, and make sure that you're covering all the bases.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. And so for a student who doesn't help as much as that kid who maybe struggles to pay attention in very focused manner on workbooks, or having to really focus on movement of fingers and really stay focused on completing a very narrow task. If your learner has trouble with this, I don't know if this book would be for you. I have found that my learner, now that she's a little bit older, so I tried this when she was 4, did not work, crashed and burned, got through maybe 1 or 2 lessons, and just didn't work. We quit and we got through it. It was too difficult for her. And she was also very young, but she was expressing interest in learning to read. So I said, okay, let's try this. This was not it.
Yeah.
But now that she's older, she's already done the All About Reading. This has been very nice program to go through. Obviously we're only about a fifth of the way through it. But I've looked forward in time on the lessons, and I'm just seeing the progression that we'll be doing. The one thing that I like, maybe just to go back, another thing that I like about this program is it really, especially at the beginning, if you compare the lessons with your All About Reading lessons, they do a similar starting point, like with the first few letters that you're learning. You may be able to just say, I'll take 1 lesson a week, and then pair it with your All About Reading if you wanted to kind of double up on something like that.
And just reinforce it.
The one thing that I've realized that these lessons really help around blending of sounds. I saw my learner actually make some really cool gains about blending of sounds, even though All About Reading does that, absolutely. But this one really emphasizes the blending of the sounds to a level that I wish All About Reading did. And specifically, they focus on a lot of the rhyming. So they do a lot of rhyming activities. Like, for example, they'll have the letter M, and I'm going to rhyme with at. And so I can run through the whole cadence because I've done it enough. Today we're going to rhyme this letter M. Or what letter are we going to rhyme? And your reader would say M. We're going to rhyme M with the letters, with the sound at. What are we going to rhyme with? At. Okay, let's start. Which, go ahead and start. And then you just read through the cadence, and it's like, at, or s, at. And it does a really good job about blending those sounds in the call and response. And also they have this other call and response that I really, really love, where they actually just say the sounds. So I'll do this first one. It says, okay, your turn to say the sounds slowly. And so they have this difference between say it slowly, say it fast, say it slowly, say it fast, especially early on, that I really, really like, because it gets that learner to understand, okay, I'm going to sound it out and then I'm going to say it fast. And getting between those two, I really like it. So for example, your turn to say the word slowly. Say am, and then it has in quotes, am. That's what your learner is supposed to come back to you. Then you say if, and then they call in response. And then they go through like 15 words here. When I go to the All About Reading lesson and I have like a compound word that's like eggshell, and I'll say, hey, can you sound it out like we do it in the 100 lessons? Oh yeah, eggshell. And I noticed her improving her blending of sounds, because I specifically asked her, can you say it like we say it in the 100 lessons? And it has been very helpful. So blending this book with maybe another curriculum has been very, very, very helpful for my learner. And so I recommend it. At least that's how I've used it. Mm-hmm. I would recommend you getting this book just as something to put on the shelf as a curriculum choice for the early learners, because you may be able to use it as a first step, maybe after you do the 4 weeks to read, or you can do the 100 lessons, or before you start All About Reading, or if you want to blend it with All About Reading.
Or you want to do it with an older child.
Absolutely.
I think this would be really great too for those parents who are very reluctant at teaching reading, because it seems it's so prescriptive.
It is so unbelievably prescriptive.
I would say that this is
scripted. Yeah.
This is probably a terrific program if English is not your first language and you are trying to teach your children how to read in English. This is probably a great program for you, because you don't have to. It's so prescriptive. It guides you so well that you don't have to be a native English speaker probably to teach this program.
I'd love to know if they have this in other languages, because I'd love to
use it to learn a different language.
Another language. I bet you would be really cool.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, but I think it would be great for parents if English is their second language.
Yeah. So we've a lot of people may have heard the 100 lessons and learn to read in 100 lessons. I think its accolades are there. The reason why it's so great, I think some of the resistance that you'll see people giving it 1-star or 2-star reviews is because they had a negative experience with their learner. And that is really just tailoring this curriculum to the learner to the time period in the learner's reading, wherever they are in their reading level. Tailoring it to the right time, I think, is an important thing to do with this, because it is so dense and so scripted and so specific. I think it can be very challenging.
And it could be, for our learner, when you tried it, it was dry for her.
Oh yes,
it was very dry.
It's also very boring. Right.
Right. This is not a dynamic program. No. There aren't pretty pictures. There's not an app or music or cool stories that go with it. I mean, there are small stories in it, but they're black and white. It's like a single black and white picture and a few lines. It's not that kind of thing. So I think it would be like we said, I think it'd be really great for a slightly older learner, or to reinforce concepts you're doing with another program. Yep. But I would not get this and start a new 5-year-old on it, because I think it's much too dense for that purpose. So this is a bit of a mixed bag. I think we recommend getting it, especially for the low price. You can often find these at thrift too. You can look around and get them for even a few bucks at the thrift store. So I definitely we would say get this and use it at the right time, and maybe to supplement some of your other stuff, because there's a lot packed in one book, but it's not very visually appealing.
That's why I think
dynamic.
I think it's best, for the family who wants to use this. It is best used when you couple it with another curriculum, or you couple it with as a review, like I've been doing. I think it's best served in that manner, where you are metering out in an effective manner each lesson, so that you don't drive your learner insane. Because even with my 6-year-old, who's a decent, she's getting to the end of All About Reading. She can read-ish. And, I definitely see her head just, looking away and eyes flittering around. And we're only do it for 5 minutes. It only takes 5 minutes for us to do the lessons. And she's so good now. She actually gets the cadence, so I don't even have to tell her all the scripting. She knows, say it slow, say it fast, say it slow, say it fast. And she'll just do both. So there's some areas where I'm letting her slack a little bit in the scripting because she knows what we're doing and she just goes with it. And I think as long as you're doing it correctly, and that's a big emphasis they have is the doing it correctly. And that is a big thing, and that Siegfried here likes to make sure you do it correctly. Anyway, it's kind of a mixed bag. I think it's for $14. It's probably a must-have, especially if you got a bunch of early learners and you don't know what their style of learning that they're going to do. This may work perfectly, it may be terrible, but for $14, it's worth putting it on the shelf and letting it sit there and pulling it off and trying to use it at a very specific time to supplement, to review, and to maybe introduce a learner to read. But I don't know if I would recommend that.
Thanks so much for joining us today and making us a part of your homeschool journey. Please engage with us on social media. Join our Homeschool Together podcast group on Facebook and find us at Homeschool Together Podcast on Instagram. We'd love to hear your feedback, questions, and recommendations. Until next time,
happy homeschooling!